In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. Show of hands, who was here just a few weeks ago when Deacon Andrew Bennett was here talking to us about breaking down barriers? Just a few hands. Okay, all right. So for those who were there, you guys heard about the first part of the series where we spoke about this whole idea of breaking down barriers at the level of being able to go past certain traits that we have in our weaknesses as human beings to be able to connect to other people. Now, Deacon Andrew came and spoke specifically about the level of being able to first recognize that I need to be able to embrace God if I want to be able to embrace humanity. Today the conversation is going to be at a lot more practical level. And forgive me, I'm going to speak very bluntly. Some of you might find it funny, other of you might cringe because, yes, we're mocking something that is very real, but we're going to talk about a lot of the traits that we see in our community, in our churches, and more specifically in ourselves. Okay? A lot of us like to discuss these things that I'm about to share with you right now at the level of, our parents do this, our elders do that. But the truth of the matter is, I want to tell you that we do the exact same thing. And when I say we here, it's because obviously I take many of the confessions of the people your age. At the same level, I'm willing to confess to you that I fall into these same traps myself, even as clergy. So I don't want us to think throughout this conversation that, when you're sitting down in a really good sermon and you think to yourself, if only so-and-so was here, he really needs to hear this. He could really benefit from today's sermon. Don't do that. Just assume for a moment that I'm speaking to you. Okay? So the conversation that we're going to have today is more specifically is how to become a welcoming church. How to become a community of people, of believers who are willing to embrace those who want to come and to know Christ, regardless of social stature, of gender, of ethnicity, of language, of whatever it is that makes them different from us. And the whole conversation is going to be focused on the idea of, are we supposed to be focusing on what we do or who we are? Is it about doing or becoming? The first thing I want to share with you is two concepts that are really important. And please, I need this to really sink in. The first is what the church calls theoria. Theoria comes from the idea of being able to witness God, to see God. I want to tell you that there is a very big difference between being a church that allows people to see God and a church that focuses only at the level of theatira. There's a difference between theoria and theatira. Theoria is to see God. Theatira is where you get the word theater, literally, to act. There are those who, because they live among us, we see God in them. And there are others who act like God. And so you only get basically leftovers. You don't get the real thing. And I have a serious fear that we're training a generation of people to act like God. And not in the good way. Not in the sense where we act like His only begotten Son. Not in the sense where we grow in His likeness and we imitate His kindness, His compassion, His love. But I'm talking about acting like God at the level of judgment. Acting like God at the level of condemnation. Of categorizing people. Acting somehow as if we are better than others. Now, I know that this might seem like, okay, but Abuna, are you really sure this is what's supposed to be addressed to our generation? And yes, definitely. I want you to know that it begins with us. It begins with us. We need to stop acting like the problem is outside of my heart. The problem is always within. Always. If I were to ask you the question, if you were a person coming into the church today, and now for just a moment forget which church. It doesn't matter what parish it is. If you were walking into a typical Coptic Orthodox church in Canada today, what do you believe some of the barriers are that currently exist? Just name a few of them that come to mind, please. Language. What else?
Skin tone.
Skin tone. Okay. Too dark, too light. Okay. What else? It was very politically correct of you, by the way.
I think just the overall culture.
Culture of?
Different, very different.
No, tell me specifically what about the culture, because you're right. Overall culture might be an issue sometimes. No, not all of it. There's some of it that's, we're really good at feeding people. That's not a problem. That's not a problem, right? But tell me something specifically about the culture. Let me just, for the sake of being blunt, let me just reword what Andrew said. Racism, okay? Racism is an issue within the church, Okay? So the problem is not skin tone. We've got dark people in the church. Right? You go to Ilminia, there's dark people. Right? I'm Egyptian and I'm as pale as you get. So we have a serious problem when it comes to racism specifically. Well, you were going to say something. No? Tamara, you had your hand? No? Arseni?
Attire?
Attire. Oh, the way we dress. Okay? Yes.
When you said culture, it was more like, I was thinking more like how Egyptian you are, I guess. Because like some people who are born here would be more like Americanized or Canadianized than people who are, you know, who just came to Canada.
Okay. So
Their age and most.
I want you to tell me specifically what makes an Egyptian in the
No, I mean, like,
in the mind of those who would use that as an excuse.
like,
What are they referring to?
like how in tune with the Egyptian culture you are. Like some
What
people-
specifically?
Like in terms of like your language, your
Okay.
what you eat, how you dress, how conservative you are. I
Okay.
guess.
Very good. Very good. Yeah, David.
Judgment?
What do you mean? So I'm talking about a social barrier here specifically, or the barriers that we would face if we were entering into the church. I want you to tell me specifically what you would be judged on. That is the barrier. Judgment is the general sin, right? But I want to know specifically what you would get judged on. So we spoke about attire, we spoke about language, we spoke about racism in general, how it is that you'll be judged simply by how dark or how light you are, right? What else? Yes?
I feel also the
Knowledge?
of the religion. For example, I feel like some people, they take the religion to show off how, comment ils sont pure, how they know a lot of hymns, how they...
Interesting.
they're very, and like, so, I don't know, it's like a mask, I think.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah.
The way someone expresses himself, like you see like someone with this like face tattoo.
Okay. So anything that's expressed at the at the level of like an outward expression of tattoos or earrings, or again it goes to attire, but more than just that, right? The way that you carry yourself in general, right? Or the color of your hair, if it's dyed, if it's long, if it's short, if it's too too long, if it's too tall, if it's too like everything is a problem, right? Yes, and then I'll come back to David.
Being too open-minded or closed-minded.
Okay, so how open-minded or closed-minded you are, and that can vary depending on who you're speaking to, right? One day you're too closed-minded, the other day you're too open-minded, and depending on the subject, you could be Jesus or Satan. Yes, David.
Judgment, it's more like from like back in the day. It was mostly like the hardcoreness of the Orthodox, which was like if a guy were eating earrings in church, he'd be like, "What do you like?"
Yeah.
You gotta, like, if you dye your hair, like what's the problem?
Yeah.
Like, stuff like,
Absolutely.
So it's like the stuff that like if I could say like our parents are not used to. Now, like even tattoos back in the day was like, oh my god, like look at.
Well, I would love to agree with you back in the day because it's still an issue today. It's still an issue today. I would love to agree with you that it was something of the past, but no, I would like to argue that it's very much part of the present also. Yes, Caroline.
Tastes and like activities or music or whatever.
Okay. Anything else? Yes, Mira.
Not so much for newcomers, but, or I guess if I was a newcomer, I would probably want to get in with a group that's like not so like Coptic versus, you know, somebody who, you know, people who like hate Hillsong versus people who are okay with listening, you know, like Hillsong, you know what I mean?
Okay, so if you listen to worship music kind of thing. Yeah. Okay. Okay. All right. I love how Coptic is derogatory now. Right? Like, oh, he's Coptic. It's now become an insult. Lord have mercy. Lord have mercy. There was a hand that went up here somewhere. Yes.
I don't know if this applies, but like how each church functions, and if you don't know that, like going in on the men's or the women's side, like how communion functions.
Yeah.
If you don't know where to go,
Yeah.
you look like you don't belong.
The more local, like small T traditions, right? If you're wearing a veil, if you take off your shoes, if you stepped in with your right or your left, backwards, forwards, like the whole thing, right? Okay, so we discussed a whole bunch of them. What's the problem with this? The problem is that I want to tell you that we got to stop acting as if we have no say and that we don't set the tone for these kind of things. I can't emphasize this enough, and I really think it's a shame that you guys don't believe it when we say it. There's a lot of people who make the mistake of speaking to your generation specifically and saying you're the future of the church. You're not the future of the church. You can't be the future of the church. You have to be the present. You have to be the heartbeat of the church today. You are either the church today or you will never be the church. You don't believe me? Walk into a church where, very simple example, very basic example, okay? There are some churches where it's still 75, 80-year-old men who are running the show. They took it over when they were 17, and now 65 years later, they're still in charge, and nobody has taken over. Nobody has dared try to take the microphone away from Uncle Midhat. I don't know of any Midhats in Ottawa, so I'm just saying, nobody has dared say, maybe I can lead the youth service, maybe I can be on the board of deacons, maybe I can teach the women how to do X, Y, and Z, maybe I can run the summer camp. If we are not the heartbeat of the church today, there is no hope for our church. If you sit there on the sidelines and stare at the church as if you bought a ticket and you're watching a show and you're complaining about how the show sucks, you're part of the problem. We have to recognize that we have to bring about this change by speaking out against anything that is evil within the church, by educating those that we serve in Sunday school, by making sure that among us these things don't exist, where we don't judge people based on what they listen to, or how they dress, or where they came from, or if their parents are divorced, or if this person had an ex-fiance, or if this person, whatever. All of these things make the church so difficult to integrate in. All of these things make the church unwelcoming. And not only for those who come in for the first time, but even for those who have been here for years and are just looking for a way out. I want to share with you a conversation that a lot of the fathers have together, especially when they're among the fathers who give what we call catechesis. Do you guys know what catechesis is? Have you heard this before? Catechesis is basically the teaching that you give to a person who wants to enter into the church and be baptized, right? So for those of the fathers who are given this responsibility to meet with newcomers and to teach them the faith and then lead them to baptism so they can become part of the body of the church, the biggest problem that we have is retention. They're super excited to come in. They're super excited to embrace Christ. They're super excited to be baptized. They gobble it all up, and most of the time they become more Orthodox than 90% of the population. They know their stuff. They studied it. They willingly chose to leave something behind in order to embrace the faith. They're on fire. 18 months later, they're not at church anymore. They don't know what happened. We were super happy to baptize them, and then they felt judged. They felt isolated. They felt unwelcome. They felt like they were always the new guy. They felt like they were always the person who's outside, who came in. Not part of us, not one of us. We have a responsibility towards this. Listen, this is going to be slightly depressing, but I need to share with you 3 stories. 3 really depressing stories, okay? But the purpose of the stories that I'm going to share with you are to provoke you into thought. Now please, again, I urge you, the stories I'm about to share with you, the purpose is not for you to sit here and say, again, oh, I wish Tante so-and-so was here because she does this stuff all the time. Okay? It's the purpose is for you to realize that you can very easily become Tante so-and-so tomorrow morning, if you aren't already a mini version of her in a different way. The purpose is not to say, I wish Uncle so-and-so or Deacon so-and-so or Abuna so-and-so could hear this. The purpose is for you to realize that there's a part of this that could be very well inside you as well. The first story is called Please Leave. Very unfortunate story. A young man from a different faith entered into a Coptic Orthodox church in Canada. You have a question already? These are 100% real. 100% real, but all locations and names have been made up. Okay? So this guy approaches the priest and he says, I want to become part of the faith. Why? Because I feel like God is calling me. It's not the first time that I meet a Coptic Orthodox person. Coptic Orthodox person has spoken to me about the faith several times. I want to know more. My faith doesn't make sense to me. Sits with the priest, sits with servants. Fast forward 12 to 18 months. The kid is attending like non-stop all the youth meetings, Tasbih has Vespers, he's attending liturgies, he's not communing, he's really eager, he wants to get baptized. And it looks like it's really going to happen. And the youth have taken him in and they've loved him. And a group of the people have really made him feel like he's part of the community. And it's incredible. And this person feels like I finally found my salvation within this community. It's a wonderful thing. And then rumor gets out that his family, or that he is an whatever religion he was part of. And some of the youth start to gossip among themselves, right? About how like, yeah, but what would make a person like leave their faith overnight? What did he really see in us, right? I really think he's here because he's into so-and-so. And they made it sound like he was only there because he was into this one girl in the group. The rumor got to the parents. The parents went running to Abuna. They told him, this person has come in to steal our daughters. His only intention is to take them away. It's all an act. It's this and that. Fast forward a little bit, and Abuna is forced to sit down with the person and say, forgive me, Habibi. He doesn't matanya. It doesn't I have to ask you to leave our church. Lessons. The person never came back. I wouldn't be surprised if the person can't stand anything that has the word Jesus in it. I wouldn't be surprised. What do we learn from this? And please don't be judgmental and aggressive and like, I don't want a session of like 40 social justice warriors, okay? What I want us is to be rational and to say literally, here is where we failed. Here's where we can learn from this. Yes, go. Yeah.
To not make false rumors,
Yeah.
assumptions.
Yeah. Avoid assumptions at all cost. Forgive me for saying it this way, but أنت مال أهلك. What does this have to do with you? Why are you making assumptions as to the intentions of the heart? God forbid that your intention should ever be revealed to anyone else. Why are you trying to fill in the blanks with what you think is juiciest? And this started at the level of the youth, not the parents. Yes?
Yeah, like you were saying, does it really matter what brought them to the church? Your job is once they're there to show them Christ and to change it for the right reason.
Right?
If they came for the wrong reason.
Yep, absolutely. There's this saying that says it doesn't matter where you came from, it's it doesn't matter where you came from. That's the more important part of my message, really, right? And that is the honest to God truth. It is the honest to God truth, because if I'm being honest with you guys, if this very specific congregation, this parish here in Ottawa, St. George and St. Anthony, had any idea who it was that they were voting for 4.5 years ago, and if they knew anything about my past, anything, if they had interviewed any 5 random people from my high school, right? They would have crucified me. Crucified me, let alone said that we want him to serve our children. It really doesn't matter where you came from. And that's the entire message of the gospel. Yes, there was other hands. Caroline.
I feel like the parents also had a hand in this, and that since they're older, they're supposed to know better than to feed into these rumors. And I guess it was up to them. I feel like it would have been decent into like going to more fact checking or be more reasonable about it.
So not to believe everything we hear.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Like in the story, there was no like interaction with the guy. Like, no one confronted him. No one asked him about it. No one like talked to him about it. Everything was just like about him, but not like to like. You know what I mean? I feel like if you're curious about someone, you should talk to them directly, not like talk about them.
And that didn't really happen, did it? What we do is believe what we want to believe.
Yeah.
And then we move forward immediately to execution. Right?
But, Abuna,
Yeah.
if you don't mind, I ask, what was the age, not the age, but like the mentality of the Abuna that sit with the guy and told him to leave? Because if he sat with I feel like he was convinced of what the parents said. And it's not to justify what the parents did, but like, I'll talk about my parents, like, it's not like they hate the other religion, but like, it's because of the history that they lived.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you hear like stories like, because I was Christian, I couldn't be like mu'ayyid or like teacher or whatever it is, like, because when you're Christian in Egypt, like you had so many opportunities that were taken away from you because just you're a Christian. And when you listen also to the history, they know like a lot of, like, so their mentality is so based on this history. And my dad, he used to tell me a lot of stories about this religion that used to take the girls and rape and blah blah blah, and it's so real into their mind. So when I try to justify it, just like it's not even worth it. Like he'll find me like I was like, what's going on? What's wrong with you? You know, like he won't understand that it's a new generation. I don't think this way. I've never lived these things and all. Like one of my best friends, she's Muslim. You know, so he won't understand like what he lived, what he knows, and that's real for him.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's Abuna who should like be more like a mediator between both like the youth and the older generation.
Sure, but you guys will never understand the idea of being stuck between a rock and a hard place at the level of being a priest. You specifically, you'll never understand, right? Like, I think that's safe to assume, right? But at the general level, we think we know. We think that no, you stick to what is right. It's not that simple. But I think you did say something that can apply to the general public and not only at the level of the priest. You talked about how I shouldn't be projecting my experiences as a general, what do you call it? A generalization on a group of people, right? I was speaking to a person just recently who was telling me, actually, forget the example. Have you ever spoken to someone where you're telling them the story about, oh my God, I was dealing with my garagist, and this guy, this mechanic is horrible, and he tried to steal from me, and he told me this one thing, turned out he was totally wrong. The $40 part, he was going to charge me $500, and the person goes, oh, what nationality was he? Why does that matter? What does that have to do with anything in the conversation? Right? What nationality? And if you were to say Mexican, Turkish, Indian, Iranian, French, Canadian, whatever you say, the next response is always going to be, oh, they're all like that. Right? And you can make it up. Say he's from El Salvador. Oh, they're horrible. No matter what you say, the generalizations of, oh, I've dealt with them. Like, what are you talking about? And we do that. We do that. And yes, the reality that people have experienced, we cannot deny that sometimes it's extremely traumatic and it's extremely real and it's unjust. But to then turn around and say that anybody and everybody who falls into a category of people is somehow like demon-possessed and evil and like the spawn of Satan, like, I think we have to take it a step down. And I want you to know that we do that. We do that. Second story. Horror story number 2. Yeah. Yes?
Sorry, last question. If you were the Abuna in that situation, what would you say with that?
I wouldn't be able to answer you. I don't know the full details of the story from beginning to end. But definitely, I don't think it's... No, I think I would have probably served the person outside of my congregation and brought him to a parish who could take him. But if I was forced to get rid of him to avoid like people setting fire to the church and causing major division, those are not easy situations to deal with. They're really not. They're not as clear-cut as people think. Horror story number 2. One of them. So here's a story. Beautiful little church decided that it was going to dedicate most of its services to people who are, downtrodden, and they have felt so much discrimination in their life, and the poor and the beggars and the prostitutes, and really sincere outreach, real stuff, okay? Where 1 in 3 people was a non-Copt who entered into the faith. Very small community, okay? And right next to that church, there was another church not too far away. And that church was a traditional Coptic church with a lot of newcomers. Like most of the people who were attending have been in Canada for less than 5 years. Lots of judgment. They don't like seeing people of darker tones, like Andrew was saying. They major judgments. As soon as they see a tattoo, then you're probably a drug addict, right? Those kind of assumptions. If God forbid a girl has streaks that are anything but blondish, if they start going into the pinkish or the purple, then she's probably a crackhead. Major judgment. And this small community was doing incredible things, very focused on the service, really wonderful stuff. They shared the same area for parking because that's how close the churches were. An older lady, one day in the winter, didn't find parking. So she had to park a little bit closer to where they serve those homeless people, and those people have entered into the church, and that church of outcasts, if you wish, right? She parked there in the winter, and on her way out, there's a woman who holds a cane. She slipped and she fell. She slipped and she fell. So she spent 25 minutes on her back screaming, "Help, help." And she was screaming so loud, and she saw that people were parking and entering into the church, and they would look to see where the noise is coming from. They would see her body on the ground. They would see the body. And they would continue walking. And she was like, "What's going on? Like, why are people not giving me any attention?" So this happens once, twice, and then the third time, she starts like not just like screaming for help. She starts like cussing out the person, like, like she's like really upset now, right? So this gentleman who's walking in with his wife and his kids, he goes, "Oh, Tom so-and-so, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize it was you. I thought you were one of them." What does that mean? What does that mean? That old woman in her 70s decides that was enough for her to say, "I can't possibly ever judge another human being again." What does that mean to be one of them? And what do we learn from a story as messed up as that?
Well, using words that they use that, like, one of them less than what they are, so like, they're assuming that person who's of the other congregation is like a lesser status than they are,
Yeah,
and they made themselves the judge of the
yeah. There's like it's really blatant segregation, right?
Because they acknowledge that.
It's really blatant. Like, we're talking about the same messed up stuff that you would see in the US 50, 60 years ago, where the black people would have to sit at the back of the bus. Like, serious stuff here. Like, serious evil in the heart of a person. For you to speak in this way. Yes?
I think that people in church, they usually forget that the church isn't for perfect people. It's for people who are broken and actually need help
Yeah.
spiritually.
Yeah.
And it's like you always say, it's more of a hospital than it is for like it's a hospital for broken, sick people.
Yeah. We often try to preach the idea that the church is a hospital, not a museum. Right? It's not a place for you to go and to see people set up so you can have a look at what a righteous person looks like. Where you can come and see what a pure person looks like. You come to see people who are just as broken as you are, who have confessed that they need healing, right? But we forget this, don't we? Right? Ask yourself the question. Ask yourself the following question. If a girl, 19 years old, 19, I'm not even going to go to like the early teen years, 19 years old, in our circle of friends, here, in this small city of Ottawa, gets pregnant and her boyfriend leaves her. Everyone knows it was an unlawful pregnancy. And she decides to do the right thing and to keep the baby and not to abort. What do you think would happen to her? Tabalesh. How many people do you think her own age would gossip about her? Not gossip in the sense where they would judge her directly, but just judge her indirectly. You know, the kind of judgment where it's like, "That's really messed up. I would really hate to be her. Why do you think she kept it?" What would we do to that person? But what if a person walked in off the street and he told us that Christ appeared to him and he wants to give his life to the church? He wants to give his life to service. But he's tattooed from the forehead all the way to the chest. And our children see him and cry Because that happens, by the way. Like, kids see me and cry, right? Like, they're scared of the big man with the beard wearing black, right? Who's constantly doing this to me. They're scared. What would we do? You're more than welcome to come to church, but can we ask you, like, can you take communion and leave, please? Why do we do this? Why do those roots dwell within us? Why do we still have those kind of preconceived judgments against other people? We might think that we're a generation who's past that. I don't think we are. I don't think we are. We might not be as blatant and as vulgar, forgive me for using that word, as maybe the older generation, because the older generation almost takes pride in this, right? They take pride in the fact of, no, us and them, right? They promote it. Whereas us, we would never promote it. That's totally politically incorrect. But there's root of that within our hearts. Lesson number 3. Take them off. What's lesson number 3? This is a very personal story to me. Young man, we must have served him outside of the church for, no joke, 2 years nonstop. We'd go see him, we'd have supper with him, we'd talk to him about Christ, we'd tell him, you got to come back. And he would be he was the kind of person, he used to really bother me. Why? Because he would dress like a thug, talk like a thug, act like a thug, listen to thug music. But if you called him a thug, he would be so insulted. Right? And I'd always call him out for the fact that, you can't do that. You can't keep doing what you're doing, living the role that you are living, and expect people not to look at you as if you weren't living that role. We finally reach a point where he's open to the idea, and we convince him, listen, I don't care if you don't come to the youth meetings. I don't want to see your face at conventions. I'm not asking you to come and spend the entire liturgy. I want you to come with me. I will pick you up at 10:30. We will walk into the communion line, take the Eucharist together, and I will drive you home. That's all I want from you. Took 2 years. He says, I'm down. We're this is incredible. Borderline tears. We're doing tamagid. This is incredible. We go pick up the guy. Go pick him. And I'm so used to seeing him that I don't notice all of the traits that he has. But he has an earring. He has an earring. He had 2, actually. Okay? And we actually had the conversation the day before. Listen, for your sake, so you don't attract attention, okay? Take him off in the car. He's yeah, no, definitely, I get it. And he gets it. It attracts attention. He doesn't want attention. We get out of the car. We walk to the door of the church. Communion's about to begin. This is a 20-minute hit and run, literally. Take communion and bounce. That's all we want to do. We walk in. Who do we see? Who do we see? Not an elderly man or tant مش عارف مين. No. Another servant who genuinely loves him and serves him. Genuinely loves him and serves him. And he knows this guy. He walks up to him. He's so happy to see him. Big hugs. Fainak, I'm so happy to see you. And then he grabs him by the back of the neck to give him a kiss. And he goes, you should have taken these off. He does this. You should have taken these off. Immediately. Turned around and walked out of the church. Immediately. Lessons. Yeah.
I think sometimes we feel we can fake that we love them or fake that we're not judging them, but it's the other person's not stupid, and we need to be real. We can't just pretend like we do.
Mm-hmm. What else? Yeah.
I don't think I took the earrings off in the car though.
No, he forgot. He forgot. We had the conversation. He forgot. He walked in with the earrings. Yeah.
I feel if the person realizes that it's this hard, it got to the point where it just 20 minutes that we're banking on those 20 minutes of him taking the Eucharist and then just leaving. I feel like there are more important things than just the earrings at this point, like on the line. And the bigger picture is not how he dresses, it's how he follows.
Yeah, understand.
There's a proper way to ask for getting something done, then take this off.
Tim.
Just a comment on all the stories. I feel like we became like the Pharisees. We just look at the outside and we're like, you're horrible, I'm better than you because you do this, I don't do like you, and then.
Yeah. You know what the problem with the Pharisees was? They believed that they could have salvation by going through the motions of the actions that they had learned from those who came before them. To them it was no different than sorcery. It was magic, right? It's hocus pocus. You do this, this, and this, and you're good, right? So if I have in front of me a person who's not doing this, this, and this, immediately what does it qualify to? He's no good. That's not judgment. It's a fact. He doesn't fast. He doesn't go to church. He's had premarital sex. She's been around with guys. They come from a different background. How do we even know they believe the same thing as we do? How do we know it's really sincere? It's extremely hypocritical. You know what's funny about the third story that I shared with you? That servant that I told you greeted him at the door. He like flipped out, like he broke down into tears. He broke down. He couldn't believe how, like, if I just would have kept my mouth shut, like it was a sarcastic joke. Why would I even say that? He hated himself for it. He tried reaching out to the dude. It took forever before we can finally bring the guy back. Like, thank God, now he's married and he's in the church, he's bringing his children. God is good. That's not the point. The point is that we sometimes have momentary lapses of judgment. We lose our common sense. We forget that literally our only purpose is to make this person feel like you are the center of Christ's love. The same way that he is willing to unworthily love me. And why would I say that he can't love you? Why would I make the judgment that there is no hope for you when I know that there is hope for me and I'm pretty sure I'm worse off than you? What are we to do facing all this? I want us to know that there is really a treasure in discovering what it means to be a church that is at peace. That there's no judgments and there's no assumptions. When I say peace here, I'm not talking about no conflict, no backbiting. I mean, all of that stuff is going to exist whenever there is family, right? And that's what the church is. It's one big family. The siblings will fight, the parents will bother the children will get on the nerves of the parents. This will happen. We're a community. But I'm talking about peace at the level of like, I don't have to second guess your intentions as to why you're here. I don't have to make assumptions or judgments about the person who's standing in front of me. That if we're really part of the same family, then I don't have to worry about like, if they tell me next week, Joseph's serving my son, I shouldn't have to go home and say, okay, Michael, don't speak to him alone. I mean, why? Why would that happen? Why? I'm sorry, I just picked on you because you know I'm jealous of where you were. And now. I want to ask you a sincere question. Everybody knows the story of St. Moses the Strong, right? I really, 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 really want you to imagine that you were part of the community of the monks in that monastery. When the abbot walked in and said, "Hello everyone, I'd like you to meet our newest recruit. This is Moses." Right? And they know who he is. Why? Because he has a reputation with the group of Bedouins that will go into the wilderness and destroy villages and destroy monasteries and churches. They have a reputation. He's a murderer, he's a rapist, he's a thief, he's done all of these things. He has a reputation. And in comes next to him Abba Isidoros, who's about this big. And he says, newest recruit, newest brother, he's going to be a monk. We're taking him in, wants to get baptized. How do you sleep safely in your cell, knowing that this man can eat you? Literally. Literally. What do? Call the what? Call the cops. Even the cops will tell you, who? Moses, we're not coming. Bereshu, maybe you're thinking to yourself, like, no, that wouldn't be right, and I can't judge, and this and that. Forget that. What if I say, Moses? He will be teaching Sunday school to our grade 8 girls class. Yeah, exactly. We'd get a reaction a little bit like that, where there's like, we lower our eyes and we giggle. Right? Yeah, I'm not sure that's the greatest idea, Abuna. No, guys, trust me. He's a very good man at heart. He's changed. How much ruckus would we cause? Today, I'm talking about today. And we know his story. We know about him, we know of Mary of Egypt, we know of St. Augustine, we know what Christ did with Peter, with Matthew, we know how he turned Saul into Paul, we know all of these things, and yet you bring this man, this Goliath of a man, 7 feet tall, close to 300 pounds of muscle, and you tell me he's going to be your next room, like he's going to be in the next cell right next to you? I'd freak out. Why? Because I'm so incredibly sinful. In the meantime, if only I can find peace. If only I stop worrying about this nonsense of how everyone else is different from me. Of how I qualify that, yes, no, I know I'm a sinner. What, Abuna, I'm a bad person. Like, I know my sin. But that person is like a whole other category. We speak like this. We think like this. And this is what creates these barriers. This is what makes our brothers and sisters want to leave the church. This is what makes certain parents want to take their kids and move. And this is what makes a whole bunch of newcomers who are baptized and who have embraced the faith not stick around. There's a person by the name of Saint Seraphim of Sarov. Incredible, incredible life. This man was so holy that he used to live in the forest. His best friend was a bear. He used to feed the bear every single day. The bear would eat out of his hands. Like a Russian bear. Okay? He lived in like the forest of Russia. This is the real deal. Okay? A bear. Right? All of creation felt the peace that was instilled in the soul of this man because he allowed the Holy Spirit to indwell him and to work through him. And this is why even the beasts were capable of being peaceful around him. He says the following: acquire a peaceful spirit, and then thousands of others around you will be saved. Our responsibility is to do this. If we really want to find a way to make our churches, our communities more welcoming, it has to begin with me. Not with the other. Not with, we need to educate our parents. Not with, Abuna, you need to say this at the pulpit. Not with, we need to have these counseling forums to help people get therapy for the fact that they're super racist and closed-minded and sexist. And it has to begin with me. If I acquire the spirit of peace, my church is that much closer to becoming a welcoming and loving church. So how do I do this? 2 very silly examples. People will start to see Christ in those who are like God. So how does this happen? Does anybody here cook? Who here likes to cook? Yes? Yes? Question. How do you make a piece of meat acquire flavor? Sorry? So there's seasoning, but the seasoning usually stays at the level of the surface, right? You marinate, right? You marinate. You basically do what? You add all of the spices and the oils that you want, and then you let it sit in that for a little while. So what does it do? It absorbs all of the flavor. So when you cook it, it's that much more tender, and it's that much more flavorful, right? Not only the scent, but the taste of it it takes on what it was soaking in. I want you to know that it's the exact same thing with the human being. If we quote unquote marinate in Christ, if we allow ourselves to literally call on the Holy Spirit, if we dwell in His presence, our aroma will be that of God. What people will taste when they encounter us is that of Him that we have been spending time with. Another silly example. Has anybody ever had anything that glows in the dark? It was a really big deal when we were younger. When we were younger, we used to have these pajamas. Right? You guys ever heard of The Simpsons? Yeah, okay, so The Simpsons was like really big when I was growing up. Okay? So you'd have these pages of, like, everybody was into Bart Simpson. So you would have these pages of Bart Simpson because that was like, all our parents bought like stuff from Value Village. That's what we did. And they would glow in the dark. How does something that glows in the dark work? What do you first have to do? Does anybody understand the mechanism? What do you do? You're mumbling. Somebody say something.
Light.
What? Yes, light. Light is a word, indeed. Yes, light.
Initial exposure to light.
So you expose it to light, right? And however, like the chemical fabric of this thingy works, okay? When it's exposed to light, it actually absorbs part of these particles. And when you go into the dark, the remnant is still there, and so it glows. I know it's such a silly and stupid example, but I really want you to understand this. You expose yourself to the light. When you come out, you're glowing. You expose yourself to Christ. When you leave His presence, people will see that. Moses went on the mountain. He comes down. People can't look at him in the face. And that's the face of Moses that's reflecting the light of God. How much greater was the light that he was exposed to? The only way that I can truly acquire peace so that souls around me can be saved is if I allow myself to acquire the aroma, the taste, and the light of God. But unfortunately, we sometimes get confused. We sometimes think that, like, no, we have to stand firm to what is true, to what is ours, right? The greatest example of this is open up the conversation of whether or not we should be praying in Coptic with any group of people and watch World War III begin, right? Everyone sticks to their opinion of what the principle and right thing to do is. We all hide behind this idea of, no, the truth is the truth, right? And some will argue, no, the truth is that you have to understand what you worship, and everyone else will be like, no, the truth is that we have a heritage and we have to upkeep it and we would be foolish to let it go. And everyone has their own standards of the argument. And we all speak and speak and speak about what we believe the truth is. And then comes a person like Francis of Assisi, who says, preach the gospel at all times, and when necessary, use words. Preach the gospel at all times, but when necessary, use words. This is an incredibly powerful statement. The statement that is being made is that you don't have to open your mouth to preach the gospel. You don't have to open your mouth for a person to feel welcome, to feel loved. You don't have to open your mouth for a person to know that you have been in the presence of God. Meanwhile, what do we have? We have Christians who are claiming the truth is the truth, and they're standing outside picketing with these big posters that says you're going to hell because you're this and that, and I'm worried for you, and so this is me trying to save your soul. You're a homosexual, you're going to hell. You're LGBTQ, you're going to hell. You're going walking into an abortion clinic, you're going to hell. You voted for, you're going to hell. Right? And this is their way of preaching the kingdom of God. People who use the gospel as a weapon. As a weapon. Where they will throw verses at you as if it were knives. We can't be that community who sits there and says, "Al-haq, haq." The truth is the truth. There's no denying it. What we need to be is a church that truly does greet, welcome, love. We need to be a church that washes feet. You know what's the most incredible thing about the Lord Christ? Is that every single time He meets a person in the gospel, He never shies away from making it clear that there is no room for sin. Think about this. He meets a Samaritan woman. She takes interest in the fact that he is the Messiah. She tells him, I don't just have a husband, there's 5 men. He doesn't tell her, it's okay. I love you the way they are. Just bring them all. All of them, just fine. I will take care of it later. He doesn't do that. He praises her for the fact that she confessed. And when he praises her for the fact that she confessed her sin to him, she later becomes Saint Fotinia and she dies a martyr. A lot of people don't even know who she is. The Samaritan woman is not just called the Samaritan woman. Saint Fotinia dies a martyr. She offers her Christ. She offers her life to Christ. Zacchaeus. Christ doesn't just say, Zacchaeus, it's all good, they all hate you, but me and you, we're going to party it up tonight. Let's go back to your place. By the end of the evening, Zacchaeus gets up and he says, Lord, if I have offended anyone, if I have stolen from anyone, I will give it back fourfold. And he goes bankrupt because he feels compelled to repent. Christ brings about change through his love. His message is not, come as you are. We don't want you to change. We love you the way you are. You're perfect and beautiful the way God created you. That's not the message. Those are all lies. The truth is that I love you regardless. You're welcome regardless. And when you come and you attend, you will leave a martyr and repentant. The sinner woman, this story, it blows my mind. It blows my mind because they set up Christ to fail. They tell him, according to the laws of Moses, she should be stoned. And you know this, you're a great teacher. Tell us. Do we throw the stones? And they're holding the stones in their hands. What's he going to do? Contradict the law that he himself gave. Contradict the law that he himself inspired. That there is no room for adultery. He can't do that. So what does he say? So be it. Let him who is without sin cast the first stone. Let him who doesn't deserve to be stoned to begin the stoning process. And he looks at her and he tells her, after all of them have walked away, where are those who condemn you? He says, they are all gone, Lord. He says, neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more. He doesn't tell her, Yalla, go quickly before they come back. He says, go and sin no more. Telling her there's no room for this in your life. Correcting her. But she leaves feeling loved. She leaves feeling forgiven. And obviously all of you know the story of the prodigal son. Matthew 10 says, he who receives you receives me, and he who receives me receives him who sent me. The people that we receive in church, that child that you don't know, that you smile at instead of looking at him and going, shh. That person who walks into church and feels lost, and you walk up to and you shake their hand and you tell them, come sit next to me. That person who you see walking out of the church and you drive by on your way to wherever you're going to have lunch with your friends. When you open the car door and you tell them, where can I drop you off? What you're doing is receiving Christ. You're receiving Christ. You're not just serving that person. In conclusion, because we've spoken quite a bit, there's no room for horror stories in our future. Those are not the churches that we want to have. We really want to be a reflection of the kingdom here. We want people to see Christ in us. If they see Christ in us, they will follow us to church. But if they come to church only to realize that the church is filled with Judases, not Christ's, why would they stay? And I pray that, God forbid, we should ever tell someone, come, 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 only for them to realize that our actions are very different. We'll conclude with the words of St. Jerome. May your actions never be unworthy of your words. May it not happen that when you preach, someone might say to himself, why does he therefore not act like this? God forbid that we should be a church that has a big sign outside that says everyone is welcome. But on the inside, it's a very different reality. The barriers that have to be torn down in our churches exist only within our hearts. If I can tear down the walls and the barriers within me, my entire church has a better chance of succeeding. As long as I am convinced that the barriers that have to be torn down are in the other, nothing gets done. To God be all glory now and forever, and to the ages of all ages. Amen.